Greetings, everybody. We are here for the 28th intergenerational meeting. Our speakers are from United States. We have Sashi Kaneko, Sashi Kaneko, Sashi, and Dr. Barron. The topic is community-based mental health research opportunities for medical students. First, Dr. Barron will introduce the topic, then we will listen to Sashi. I'm leaving the floor for Dr. Barron. Welcome, both of you. Please, let's start with you, David.
Well, let me just echo those same comments that welcome to all of you from around the world. For some of us, it's later in the evening. For some of us, it's in the morning. And the beauty of this is that we can all be together, even though we might be spread out across the globe. As some of you who have been on this for a while know that Boulan and colleagues, when I was chairing the section on psychiatry, medicine, and primary care, Boulan, who's been an exceptional supporter of education for so many years, came up with the idea that we should create something to empower our students based on his lifelong career of engaging students. And he started SEED. And now here we are, our 28th Zoom channel. We were just chatting about 20 years from now, we'll look back and say how young we all looked when we were doing these. But it's my real honor and privilege today to share a presentation I think you're all going to really enjoy. So actually, we're not going to be talking about what the title was, the original title. We are going to pick that up for a future session, and that's looking at medical students' opportunities to engage in community-based programs. And there are wonderful opportunities. And we're going to have another student-led presentation in one of our future meetings talking about this. But we're going to have a real treat today. And it's Sashi is, and I'll let her introduce herself, but she is a medical student up in Lebanon, Oregon, which is a rural town in Oregon, which is a fairly rural state on the west coast, northwest coast of the United States. And Sashi really came to me as someone who I'd been working with and mentoring with an idea for a study that was important to her. And what she's going to share with us today is from her perspective as a medical student, what got her going with this, what the challenges were, and she's going to share with you, her fellow students from around the world, kind of what it took for her to get this project going. Many of the challenges that were unforeseen, but her persistence has been really extraordinary. And I want to share with all of you the joy that I've had in being able to work with her and to mentor her. And I think for all of our senior members on the call tonight, they all know what that's like. So what I want to do is leave time. I asked Sashi to present her work over the next 30 minutes or so. I think we'll have ample time for some questions and comments. I can tell you Sashi is a very hard worker, but really very well versed and can really share the good, the bad, and the ugly in getting this thing going, so that maybe she can help some of you when you start doing your own projects. So we'll have a few minutes of some questions and comments at the end of her formal remarks. And then I think it would be appropriate to end today's session with Professor Kostyan with some of his kind of closing comments and highlighting. So the most important part of the presentation is going to start right now, and it's my great honor to introduce my student, my colleague, my teacher, because she teaches me a lot about IT. So it goes both directions. So I thank her for all her patience in putting up with me to share. And I want to thank her for sharing her story with all of you, her colleagues from around the globe. So Sashi, thank you so much. And the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Dr. Barron and Dr. Kostyan, for this opportunity. Thanks for everyone who is here today. it's a real privilege to be able to connect with my colleagues overseas, and an opportunity I don't get a lot being in Lebanon, Oregon. So I hope that you'll get something out of this. That's my main hope. And you can find your own research projects and your own ways of how you want to give back to your own communities. So let me share my presentation. It'll give me a second to connect it. And just to check, can everyone see that okay? Okay, I see thumbs up. Wonderful. Okay, so my main research topic was wanting to look at burnout in what we call URIM, underrepresented in medicine, female medical students. And I'll get to explaining that in just a second. But I did want to introduce myself first. For those of you who don't know where Lebanon, Oregon is, or the state of Oregon, and Lebanon is this tiny little green star off in the corner here. This is Western University of Health Sciences. I'm a second year medical student there. I am on the board for what we call OPSO, Oregon Physicians and Surgeons of Oregon, the school chapter, and was able to go to Chicago for a national conference this past summer. So advocacy work has been a huge part of who I am and what I'm interested in as a medical student. And I also have to put my partner, Jeremy, on here, as he is such a key supportive role to me being able to do and wear all the hats that I'm able to. Here's a short outline. We're going to talk about the study, some of the survey tools and the funding that I was able to get, some of the challenges and mentorship, and then if any of you had any questions. If you have any questions throughout, I really don't mind if you interrupt me. I love the engagement, so continue on. So URIM, so it stands for, and it's written here, underrepresented in medicine, which means those racial and ethnic populations that are underrepresented in the medical profession relative to their numbers in the general population. And in this case, it really means Black, is referring to Black, Mexican American, Native American, so the indigenous populations in the US, and mainland Puerto Rican individuals. I'm not sure how much of you are familiar with US politics, but throughout the United States history, we've had a very messy history in terms of racial politics, segregation back in the day, and then what we call Jim Crow laws, which were discriminatory against African American or Black individuals. And a lot of these laws and discriminations, although they have been abolished for a while, continue to persist in the way that students might not get the same amount of access if they are part of what we kind of identify as this URIM group. And so for me, when I was starting out, I really wanted to look at a way to support these individuals, because diversity in medicine, even if I, as an Asian American, am not considered underrepresented in medicine, I know how important diversity in medicine is. And I hope all of you also see that as part of the international community. That's how we make real progress, is when everyone's voice gets a chance to participate in our medical community. So that was sort of the underlying part of what I wanted to look at. Looking at underrepresented in medicine and the numbers. So this first box is percentage of active physicians broken down by racial ethnicities. And then this box over here, the blue box, is the percentages of the total population around the same amount of time. This was 2019, 2020. And we have an overwhelming number of Caucasian physicians. And when you look at the relative percentages, the ratios between, population and then physician percentages, it doesn't match up when we're getting down into the Black and Hispanic areas. And a lot of that is due to socioeconomic access. And I feel that there's also an issue of possible burnout. that these students are still facing discrimination in certain areas of their studies, and they're having a difficult time going through the pre-medicine process and then also medical school. And so as I made a lot of webs of writing things down and making lists of trying to focus in on what I was interested in. So there was a study done in 2022 looking at the overall burnout among students who are underrepresented in medicine. And what they came out was a little bit equivocal. So it wasn't completely conclusive. So there wasn't a huge amount of excessive burnout, but those who were underrepresented in medicine had more episodes of discrimination and greater rates of exhaustion-related burnout. And I think this really points to an area that we haven't really studied much. And so it was ripe for taking on a new research project and taking a look more of what we could do to support these medical students and contributing to the literature in this area. And then honing down even more, this was even shocking to me that 3/4, so 75% of female medical students in the US say they feel debilitating stress compared to 51% of medical students, male medical students, which is more than a 20% gap. And feelings of burnout can really contribute to rates of attrition. And while in the US we have almost equal amounts of enrollment is one thing, but are we allowing our medical students to thrive? Are we allowing our medical students to really grow in the environments they're given? And if we have such high rates of burnout that are persisting and a huge disparity in gender, then I feel that there are ways that we can remedy this. But the first thing we need to do is collect data. So I married these two things, the gender disparities, the racial disparities, and wanted to really look at female medical student burnout in underrepresented in medicine populations. It is a really big topic. So we are using two survey tools. One is the Maslach burnout scale. I came to use that because the prior studies that I had looked at underrepresented in medicine, medical student burnout, they use the Oldenburg scale, but there was a recent research study that came out that felt that the Oldenburg study did not provide good results for medical students, that the scale itself was created more for the workplace burnout, and that medical students and the medical school environment didn't contribute to appropriate results. So I ended up going with the Maslach burnout scale. And then Dr. Barron and I together created a new tool, which I have attached here on the bottom, that looks at tried to capture all of the things that we looked at with the Maslach burnout scale, but condensed because it was so long. The Maslach's burnout scale is like 30 questions, and medical students taking these surveys, they get tired. They can't go through all of it. So they end up sort of falling off and answering these tools. So if we can make a tool that's shorter, that's more concise, and allows students to answer, and we get more data, then we have more data to contribute to this area of research. Unfortunately, the Maslach's burnout scale did cost money. And so then it sent me on a whole other chase of trying to see if I could get funding for this project. And I have some connections with the Japanese American Citizens League, which is a civil rights group in Portland. And I was able to write a grant to them, and they did give me $1,000 in order to put this research together, which I am very grateful for. Some of the challenges, which are still ongoing, I think for every medical school, time is a huge issue, right? We want to do well in our studies, and that absolutely has to come first, because if we don't do well in school, then we can't stay in school. So that would be extremely unfortunate. And there's our own well-being to take care of. As someone who's interested in psychiatry, I need to make sure that I'm also taking care of my own mental health, because I'm a part of the community. I am, worth taking care of. So balancing that time issue is extremely difficult for anyone who wants to go into research. I want to say absolutely you can do it. But I would personally work on getting your academics in a stable place. And then once you feel stable with that, moving on and finding out what else you can add to it. It's because it's a balancing game. And every time you feel balanced, a new challenge comes along. So making sure you're balanced in one spot first before you move on is extremely important. I'm going to get to the IRB last because it's been the biggest part. The money was really scary. Like, oh my God, I'm not going to be able to do this research study, or I could use the Oldenburg scale, but this scale has this new research coming out to say that it's not accurate in data collection. And I don't want a study that's not going to give me accurate data. So being able to collect some funding for this was huge, and knowing that I could foster this connection. I think it helps when you know that money is not just about money. You're making a connection with a group of people. And so that grant writing is not about just getting the money. It's also about continuing to create community with the projects that you undertake, which is really exciting. It's one of the huge things that I love about being a medical student, is the community that comes with it. There was a lot of fear. Is my project important enough? Is it valuable enough? Are people going to care? Are people going to think I'm stupid or it's stupid? It was my first research project. And I needed a lot of encouragement, which Dr. Barron very willingly gave for a lot of things. The IRB has been its own challenge. And here is that IRB document on the bottom. I had a meeting with them last week, and they sat me down for an hour and basically told me all of the parts that were wrong in the study and that I needed to take a look at again. And it felt disheartening at first, but it was also extremely valuable. I think that that's a part of mentorship, is to undertake something that's new and then realize that with the advice, it's gonna be difficult, but you'll get a lot from it, and you'll learn a lot more from that. One of the things that they told me was, I was like, okay, I'll do a study. I'll start with 40 individuals, trying to get 40 participants for this study. And I met with them, and they said, no, you need 205, which is a much larger number, which is also like a little overwhelming. Okay, I've more than quadrupled the numbers that I thought I needed. In that, the IRB for my school requires me to get approval from other schools. So I have emailed 20 different schools, deans, looking for a letter to say that I can distribute this survey to their medical students, and getting a lot of rejections. But I think that is part of it, is you're going to get rejected a lot in the beginning. Even looking for a mentor, it was like, you try and you email back and you email back, and eventually you do find something that fits for you. And then the last one was something I hadn't really thought about, was the safety of participants. So if I get a response from a student that says that they're extremely burned out, I can't just leave them. So what kind of contacts am I going to have available for them to reach out to in case there's a problem? So those were some of the main challenges that I faced with the IRB, and I'm still currently working through. I need to go email back some other schools and rewrite some parts of the document. So this is a big thing for me and something that I am extremely grateful to Dr. Barron for. So I think that in terms of mentorship, and I'm happy for whatever questions anyone might have on this, but I think having a mentor is invaluable in this process. There's the knowledge, the expertise. I've done this before. You can do it too. This is how you do it. These are the people you need to talk to. These are the people that you need to connect with, which are so invaluable. And then I think as a student, it's also just so wonderful to see the light at the end of the tunnel, to be like, all right, I'm not going to feel like this all the time, where I'm like, every week in medical school, you're like, oh, I got through the week. like you crash. And then research is another thing on top of that. It's, I had never done research before. And so all the documents, all the things that I needed to think about, all the statistical parts of it that I wasn't familiar with, it's hard and it's scary. And you look ahead and you say, okay, well, if I keep at it, I will get that expertise, I will get that experience. And so that mentorship is so important. And I really want to emphasize for people looking for mentors that you don't have to find one mentor that does everything for you. I have a research mentor, and I do feel like Dr. Barron encompasses both of these things, research mentor and personal mentor. But my brother is a huge support system. My mom didn't go to college, and my dad is a first generation college student, hasn't done much research. And so even applying to my undergrad, my parents didn't know how to do the financial aid information. But my older brother, he's a professional. He's an architect. He graduated from Harvard Graduate School of Architecture and Design. And so whenever I have questions about, am I bugging this professor too much? Who do I reach out to? I feel scared. Does that mean that I'm doing the wrong thing? He can tell me, nope, I've been through it before. It's scary. You're doing great. Email them back. Here's how you can word it. So finding someone who's in your corner that understands where you're coming from in a personal way is really important, in addition to the research mentor. But they don't need to be from the same person. Lastly, just to wrap up before we have questions, if there are any questions, I did just want to, these are my grandparents, and a lot of the reason for this research study and my interest in advocacy. They were in the Japanese internment camps in World War II. So the US was, after the bombing of Pearl Harbor in World War II, the US was afraid of Japanese retaliation. So they took all the Japanese Americans and they put them in camps farther inland. So my grandparents were there about 3 years. They were kept in a barbed wire fence surrounding area. And I think for them, it wasn't just being in there, but also the experience of getting out and having a hard time finding jobs. My grandmother wanted to be a teacher, but she felt no one would hire someone who was Japanese. So she didn't go to college and didn't feel like she would have a chance. And so for me, doing this kind of research of how do I support students now who are struggling maybe under similar barriers is something that gives me life and gives me purpose, and is a way that I can feel like I give back to my grandparents and my family's legacy. So that's my presentation. Oh, these are my citations. And that's my presentation. If anyone has any questions, I'd welcome them, but no pressure either way. And thank you so much for listening.
Well, Sashi, thank you so much for sharing the good, the bad, and the ugly in such an articulate way. For those of you on the calls, just so you know, so this came about just within the last few days. So Sashi literally put these slides together probably within the last 48 hours. So quite a feat in and of itself. But what I think you saw is some of the really key points of doing research. It's having that idea, having that personal passion, which I can tell you, Sashi has had from day one when we first talked about this. And I think she did a really good job describing how that passion drives her through this. She's got a personal commitment to it, doing it the right way. And I think that's something that's so important to remember. You know, she didn't take the easy way, which would have been use an instrument. And we sat down and I don't know how many weeks and months on the phone developing our own instrument and going through that. But then going out and seeking funding on her, she did this all on her own. This was not me. I tried to help her where I could, but this was her self-initiative. And that's what I think as students, it's the drive that got you to medical school in the first place. And I know in the US, we have a different system than in most of the rest of the world, but the idea of having a community of supports, both of teachers and of your family and of your classmates, I think these are the themes that to me are very much universal. That it doesn't make any difference where you're going to medical school. These are the same. And once we get through the questions, we would really like to have Professor Troskin talk about this from the perspective outside of the US, because I really believe there's a universality to many of the key themes here. You know, an ethics board, we might call them different, but it's understanding how they work and what it means. And what I love about what Sashi has done is it was a challenge, but she viewed it as a learning opportunity. I didn't tell her what to say in this talk. They said this was a challenge and she learned something from it. And I think that's something as a student is those biggest challenges are sometimes the ones that we address and we learn and we grow. And I think that's what makes us a better clinician, a better educator. So many, many layers of important themes that I want to thank her for putting this presentation together, for being a real credit to her school, and taking on a topic that I think is really important. And I'm hoping that some of the students on the call, if they view this, might want to join her and make this an international project where we could look at some female medical students around the globe and maybe make a portion of this a seed project. But I'll leave that up to Sashi and to some of you. So let me throw this over to Balan to see if maybe you can just handle the questions and the comments, and then maybe some comments from Professor Joskin, and then we can get on with either the evening for those of us here in the West Coast of the US or the rest of the day in much of the rest of the world. But Sashi, again, thank you so much for just a wonderful presentation.
Thank you, David. I really appreciate to hear what Sashi has told us. As David has said, you have shared with us sincerely your progress, how you have gone through all those challenges. And thank you indeed. I believe we will be hearing from you the results of that study in the coming intergenerational meetings. We really would need that. By the way, the new tool is also very interesting. Maybe when you present your results, you could give much more information about that tool. Because as you say, the usual tool for burnout does not tell much about medical students. And I'm very glad you are producing a new one. By the way, when can that be used? Let me ask it to both of you, David and Sashi.
I think we have to test the validity of the instrument first, which is going to be through comparing it with the Maslach burnout scale. So it has to be at the conclusion of the study that
of the study.
will show whether or not the new tool will be is efficacious and valid.
I'm sure it will be used by our seed members. I hope so.
And I can say, for those of you who know, I've developed a number of tools over the years that are used, and there'll be no charge for this. Sashi and I developed it together, back and forth. We trimmed it down to make it the size that we wanted from the get-go. And since we put this thing together, we own it, not the university. And all the tools that I've developed, some of them have been used for quite a while now, there will be no charge. The only thing we'll ask is that if you make money off of it somehow, donate the money back to the medical student support group at your university. So it will be something you won't have to go out and get a grant the way Sashi did, just showing her, her direct commitment to doing it the right way. But I think, as she said, we want to make sure that it's a valid tool. It's based on actually the work that I've done in burnout for over 40 years, a lot of it with athletes. And I think in many ways, medical students have a lot of commonality with elite athletes. So it would be great that we could do this. Would like to maybe get it translated into a few different languages, which I think is always better. Maybe I'm sure we could get a Turkish version and maybe a native Malay version, and maybe whatever students are there. But it would be a wonderful project that, and again, I think Sashi and I would be thrilled and honored to have this, expand. We'll throw our names on it, but the money will always be kept in your pockets. So thank you.
Thank you very much. I know you always do these things for the sake of science and for the development of medical students. That's what you always do. And I don't want to talk too much about the other details. Maybe Idil and Kashmin are also on our meeting. Would you like to say something, Idil?
Yeah, thanks so much, Dr. Joshkun, and thank you so much, Dr. Baron and Sashi. This was like a wonderful presentation. It's just, I just wanted to say, like, Sashi, the very first points that you mentioned, it took me back to when I was in medical school, which wasn't that long ago, but and I was coming to be aware of like the disparities in medicine and in medical education. And I mostly come across two types of, mentors or faculty that one were like completely oblivious or even like happy about this disparities. And the other half was like kind of aware something was wrong, but the approach that they would take towards it would be to like encourage us and make us, empower us so that we believe that we are capable of, let's say, pursuing careers in surgery or like in other male dominant fields. And after a point, I realized, yeah, that's very well meaning, but it was never really a question about our capabilities, whether, women can be surgeons or women can be like successful physicians. It's rather that are the cultures in these fields welcoming towards women, like, or do they just like wear women down till like, or do they support such toxic cultures that are kind of like a proxy of patriarchal systems that we have in greater society? So I really appreciated your comment about, enrollment is like one thing, but it's not really a question of capability. Like there is, I think, for any person who has common sense, there is no question whether a Black physician or a Black medical student, medical school candidate is better, they're as capable or as their like white peers. Of course they are, but one, they have like systematic barriers, structural barriers, less resources. But even if they overcome that, like, is the culture in medicine going to be a culture that will, as you said, allow them to thrive? And I just want to highlight that I really appreciate you pointing that out, like just from the get-go, that like addressing these disparities, it's really about just like recognizing the structural inequalities that we have. And it doesn't finish at the enrollment level. If anything, it's just like the beginning of the work that we have to do. So yeah, I just wanted to point that out. And I'm at the East Coast, by the way. I'm calling in from New Haven, and it's 1:30 a.m. right now. But I'm really I just wanted to say, like, I'm really happy that I opted in to join. I'm really like passionate about my sleep, but it was a pleasure to just like watch your presentation.
Thank you so much. And I hope you get some rest after this, but absolutely. Like, I think so much as a woman, also, you feel like, oh, I just have to be perfect at everything. You just have the perfect response to maybe sexist comments. And so realizing that that's not your thing to carry, I think is hugely empowering. So yeah, thanks so much for acknowledging it.
I think I have made a mistake in writing the times for various places, and Kashmin has said she had difficulty in getting the right time. Sorry for that, but she's still with us. If she likes, she could contribute to whatever she wants to say. Would you like to say anything, Kashmir?
No, thanks, Dr. Joshkin. Actually, I didn't attend the whole presentation. I just got to the last slide. I just got the message when I read your WhatsApp that meeting has started. But by the end, I think it was a very good presentation. But I will try to watch it on the YouTube and see what was it about. So I have literally no idea, but I'm very grateful that I got the opportunity to at least attend the last minutes of this. Thank you so much.
Sorry once more about the timing. As Kashmin has said, I'm always hoping that these video recordings will be watched in the future, and they are present. They will be present in our archive for future visits. And we need, as you see, we have a little number of participants in the meetings. Last month we had Idil speaking, and still we had very few number of participants, but I'm sure they have been watched on YouTube. So although you may not be able to give much detail, could you elaborate some more, Sashi, about the study you are running, about what kind of community activities you are touching on? Did I understand correctly? Community mentoring.
As far like what, as in terms of the study, or sorry, just to clarify. Yeah. I think I meant more in terms of when you start a project that is really a passion project, and you get a chance to present to other people and communities, and also reach out and say, hey, I want to do this study at your school. Can I do it? You meet people that are equally passionate about it, and you connect with individuals that you can form a community with that help you feel not so alone in your passion, and that you can find support with as well. So yeah, that's what I meant.
Thank you. As medical students, I believe you all, I'm sure David agrees with this, you may start thinking about the community as a whole, not only the students, not only your small environment, but the whole area which you will be serving for in the near future, in the coming future. So doing your best to reach them will be useful, of course, will help you. Idil now is a resident at the university. Do you have some contacts with people out of your clinic, Idil? So, any contact with people other than your patients?
So basically, we have a very nice public psychiatry interest group at Yale. I'm just like a member of it. My lovely co-residents from the PGY 1 year, they run it. And basically what they do is they collaborate with community mental health, facilities or advocacy groups, and they bring residents and these parties together. And it has been a very valuable experience so far. We have done visits to several places who provide community mental health care in Connecticut, and also arranged a meeting with a legal advocacy group that's mainly does advocacy in court settings. Like they basically they organize and recruit physicians so that we could write letters for people who are going through the legal system and also struggle with their mental health. So yeah, I would say, I mean, being an intern year, I personally have not explored the community to the extent that I would like, but we do have that opportunity. And thanks to my co-residents, I had that sort of exposure as well. I actually had a question to Sachi. If it's okay to, I don't want to okay. You mentioned like among the things that you considered, you also mentioned participant safety. And I actually thought that was like very important because, you know, people who are not familiar with research, who we're hoping that it will be the audience of this talk. As researchers, our role can be like often perceived as just like, passive observers. But there's also a very important ethical consideration, as you pointed out, that we actually deal with real people. So we have to understand the implications of the things that they're going through, like the real life implications. And I think I always thought about this in the context of, making sure that the data I collect is safe, to protect our privacy, or if I'm doing like any sort of intervention, making sure that that intervention doesn't cause any harm. So I thought, like, when you mentioned, you looked up some resources that you could provide to participants if they, express severe burnout or like express that need of support. I thought like that was a very like valuable perspective that I have not necessarily like considered. So I appreciate that. I just wanted to ask, like, could you just give a few examples of like the resources that you come up with in this process, if you have any under your hand?
I think that's something I'm struggling with. I originally put down the physician crisis hotline, but I think that the IRB felt like medical students didn't quite fall under that realm. So they recommended Western University of Health Sciences uses the Optum Health Plan, but that doesn't cover the other students that I'm reaching out to at other schools. So I have to do a little bit of digging for myself to see if that we have anything currently going on in the US that is more directed to medical student support on like a national scale.
an important way to address that is forget the study. If an individual student called the school or somehow a professor, a classmate, someone said, this student is really experiencing, the exhaustion, all the classic symptoms of burnout. They're not enjoying what they're doing anymore. They feel hopeless, helpless. They feel like, what can the school offer? Because each school this whole burnout thing has really come to the fore post-COVID, when it kind of spiked in a lot of areas. Not that it didn't go on before. So I think one of the ways, not only for Sashi, but for all of you, is sometimes the best way to find the appropriate community resources is to see what currently exists. If someone in your school came in and was having signs and symptoms of burnout, what would the school do? And some are better than others. Peer support groups turn out to be very effective when it comes to things like burnout, being able to sit and listen to other students and how they, in fact, that's some of the most effective suicide prevention programs globally have been peer group related. So I think one of the things you might find out in doing your research is we really need to develop more in this area that, I've worked very hard to try to find in that. So research, sometimes we find things out that wasn't the primary goal of the original research, but it leads to other things. And I think your question is a really good one. And this is why you learn so much in going through it. You learn, geez, I didn't really think about if someone maybe hasn't talked about it, because, you never want to feel vulnerable as a medical student or as a physician. Physician burnout's at an all-time high in the United States. I mean, there's articles, and from Yale, a lot of the studies have been done with colleagues from Yale and Columbia back east. So it's a really important point that you raise, that research is not about just coming up with numbers to publish a paper or to get a grant or to get into a residency or to get tenured, but it's really about understanding needs, asking the right questions that lead to the next set of good questions. And in Sashi's case, what it's now is, the next question is, hey, are there appropriate sources where a minority, underrepresented woman medical student can go, where she'll feel comfortable? Well, she'll have a sense of confidence that people are here for me, that I'm not showing a vulnerability that's going to put me, in a bad situation, whether it comes to as a student or as an intern and resident. So it's a very good question. And this is why I think you learn so much when you engage in research. People ask the questions. The IRB asks them, geez, I never really thought of it. And I can tell you, 40 plus years in the field, I'm still people that say, geez, I could have thought of that 30 years ago, but now's, now better late than never. So it's an ongoing process. But if you have the passion that Sashi shared with us, the passion drives you through it. And then they become, instead of challenges, they become learning opportunities. They become growth opportunities. They give you an insight that maybe you never had you not done that. Professor Koshin, do we have any other questions? The one thing I always talk about, as my dear friend Bulan says, is we always be respectful. We're respectful of ourselves, of our patients, of our teachers, of those who allow us to do what we do, whether it's our family or friends or the people who keep the heat on and that, and the buildings clean. And one of the things about respect is we should always respect each other's time. And Sashi said, that balancing time is no small feat as a medical student these days. So based on that premise that has driven my career as a medical educator and as a researcher over the years, is if there are no more questions or comments, we're not going to stick on the phone. We're going to let our friends who it's in the middle of the morning get a good night's sleep, and those of us who it's a Sunday afternoon enjoy their day off. So if there aren't any further comments, I'm going to have the last word go to my friend and colleague who's responsible for all these things. I want to thank you. I hope the people on the YouTube maybe consider getting a hold of Sashi. Maybe if you could put your email up on the chat, people might want to contact you if they have other questions, or maybe they want to get involved as well. I can see this project growing. And I want to thank all of you for coming on board. And again, I want to my deepest thanks to my student and my teacher, Sashi.
Thank you, David. I would like to cover up with a wish about the possibility of extending these asking questions and looking for answers from different parts of the globe. And especially, as you know, we have a very hard situation in Gaza or the area around that. I wish we had some students, if they could have the chance to get in touch, so that the situation they are suffering might be a subject also in our future studies. By the way, it's not the only place where war continues. There are other places in the world as well. So suffering is more than burnout, of course, in those areas. Anyway, thank you for being with us. Hope to be in touch. Have a good time. Have a good sleep, Idil. And hope to meet at another meeting. Best wishes.
Be well. Ramadan Kareem for all of our colleagues. Bye-bye.